instead the National COVID Service. Are you happy with that? And the fishing row rumbles on. French fishermen have yet again threatened more disruptive protests if we don't grant them the licences they want. Should we give in to them? And a trial scheme has launched in the UK that sees pupils have chaperones to and from the school gates in an attempt to protect them from gang violence. But hold on, isn't that just treating the symptom and not the cause? But first, the news headlines.
Thank you. I'm Polly Middlehurst with the latest news headlines. And the Prime Minister has confirmed at least one patient has died with the Omicron variant of coronavirus in the UK. Earlier on today, the government announced that around 10 people in England had been hospitalised with the new strain.
Sadly, yes, Omicron is producing hospitalisations, and sadly, at least one patient has now been confirmed to have died with Omicron. So I think the idea that this is somehow a milder version of the virus, I think that's something we need to set on one side and just recognise the sheer pace at which it accelerates through the population.
Boris Johnson. Well, here's what the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, had to say in response to that death.
It is a stark reminder that the pandemic is not over, that the new variant is a clear and serious risk to our public health, and of the urgency of getting Britain boosted and protecting us against this threat.
Well, the Health Secretary, for his part, says the new Omicron variant now makes up 20% of all COVID cases in England. And taking urgent questions in the House of Commons, Sajid Javid also warned this afternoon 44% of new cases in London are now of the variant. He urged everybody who is eligible to get vaccinated and says a third dose of the vaccine is 70% effective at preventing symptomatic infection.
UK Health Security Agency estimates that the current number of daily infections are around 200,000. While Omicron represents over 20% of cases in England, we've already seen it rise to over 44% in London, and we expect it to become the dominant COVID-19 variant in the capital in the next 48 hours.
Meanwhile, people trying to order lateral flow tests from the government website are being told there are no more home testing kits available. But Boris Johnson says there is a ready supply of lateral flow tests and recommended people get them from shops and pharmacies instead. The Health Secretary has underlined accelerating the booster programme now in the UK does come with some difficult trade-offs. But if it wasn't prioritised now, he said, the health consequences would be far more grave in the months ahead. Virologist at the University of Warwick, Professor Lawrence Young, spoke with GBNews earlier today and shared his thoughts on the vaccine.
Very, very preliminary data from the UK Health Security Agency all indicates that booster jab will give you levels of protection, immune protection, that should be able to protect you from getting very severe disease and from getting symptomatic disease.
Well, away from COVID, a US citizen charged with causing Harry Dunn's death by dangerous driving will face a UK court early next year. Anne Sakoulas, the wife of US diplomat Jonathan Sakoulas, is accused of killing the teenager in a road crash outside a US military base at RAF Croughton in Northamptonshire in August 2 years ago. The Crown Prosecution Service says the case will be heard at Westminster Magistrates Court in January. And back to COVID, thousands of people in England are now working from home as part of the government's Plan B measures, which came into force today. Transport for London says it did see a reduction in network usage this morning, with an 18% decrease in journeys made on the London Tube, whilst it said its bus services also saw a 6% decline in use. The new measures also include the reintroduction of compulsory mask wearing in public places and, from Wednesday, vaccine passports for nightclubs and larger venues, England now joining Scotland and Wales, as well as Northern Ireland, who already have those restrictions in place. Now, in the UK, more than 500,000 learner drivers are waiting to take their driving test, all because of a backlog caused by coronavirus lockdowns. The figures come from the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency. The AA driving school has warned the backlog is too long and a clear plan is now needed. Tests were temporarily halted during the pandemic, with many facing significant delays to book their driving test. A crew member has died after two cargo ships collided earlier on today. A Danish freight ship collided with a British ship off the southern coast of Sweden, causing one of the vessels to capsize. Swedish prosecutors have said two crew members of the British vessel are now in police custody. That's all your news for now. Now let's get back to Dewbs & Co. I'll see you later.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock, my panel, Joe Phillips, journalist and author, Michael Heaver, political commentator, and Dr. Lisa Mackenzie, an ethnographer and academic. I know what an ethnographer is by now. I ask you every single week. You should test myself one of these days, see if I still remember. But welcome to all of you. And of course, you know the drill by now. It's not just about us and our thoughts. It's really important to me that I know what you're thinking. So do get in touch and let me know. You can email me gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Now, our first story tonight. One person has died with the Omicron variant of the coronavirus. The Prime Minister has stated. Boris Johnson confirmed the death earlier today when he was visiting a vaccination centre at Paddington in London.
Sadly, yes, Omicron is producing hospitalisations, and sadly at least one patient has now been confirmed to have died with Omicron. So I think the idea that this is somehow a milder version of the virus, I think that's something we need to set on one side and just recognise the sheer pace at which it accelerates through the population. So the best thing we can all do is get our boosters. We're opening up centres across the country. We're getting in the army to help with the logistics. We're expanding in every possible way. And what we need now is for the public to respond and to do what is necessary. Get boosted now.
Yeah, OK. I do have to say, and I need to make clear as well, this is my own personal view. That's all I'm talking about here. But when I watch that and I hear the end as well, you know, it's all down to us. We've got to get boosted. And then I see the reporting of that. I find it peculiar, I have to say. And I feel a little bit frustrated that nobody seems to ask some basic questions around all of this about, you know, the situation we've just heard then, the very sad death of somebody that I'm not undermining at all, because when anyone dies, it's awful, especially for their family who will now have to face Christmas without their loved one. But when it comes to the focus on Omicron, I would personally like to ask, was it Omicron that actually caused the death of this person? What was their vaccination status? Was there any comorbidities, for example? Because I do believe if we're going to use this situation to leverage people like us, all of us, to subsequently go on and have more injections, there should be transparency around this data and what that actually looks like. And speaking, of course, of booster jabs, some of you will have seen the announcement yesterday from the Prime Minister. It was all about the boosters. It was a real focus on that. And he was saying that, you know, we have to give them basically to anyone over the age of 18 in England from this week. And just to give you some context, that means that the NHS will need to supply 1 million jabs a day during this booster rollout. And what does that mean for the NHS? Well, it means the following.
Mr. Speaker, I acknowledge that our national mission comes with some difficult trade-offs. We are redeploying NHS staff away from non-urgent services. This means that for the next 2 weeks, all primary care services will focus on urgent clinical needs and vaccines, and some urgent appointments and elective surgeries may be postponed until the new year, while we prioritise getting people the booster. These are steps that no health secretary would wish to take unless they were absolutely necessary. But I'm convinced that if we don't prioritise the booster now, the health consequences will be far more grave in the months that lie ahead.
Sajid Javid there, of course, the Health Secretary. And off the back, some of these announcements, Johnson's announcement last night, for example, we've seen huge queues outside of COVID vaccination centres. The NHS booking site crashed and rapid lateral flow home testing kits ran out on the government website. Now, I have to ask, there's an important question to ask in my mind anyway, given that we've got known backlogs of around 6 million, and that's just how it stands at the moment, people are estimating it could be as high as 12 million. I want to ask you, do you think it's right that yet again the National Health Service seems to have become the National COVID Service? Jo?
No, I don't. And I think you're absolutely right. There are many, many questions that remain unanswered. And it's interesting, isn't it, that Boris Johnson, who is under fire for apparently breaking the rules when the rest of us were in lockdown last Christmas, chose to do a pre-recorded statement to the nation last night. So there was no chance for anybody to ask some of these questions that you're quite rightly asking, Michelle. We don't know about the person who died, whether they died of Omicron or whether there was something else. We don't know
But some people are pushing back to me and saying, Michelle, that's irrelevant.
Well, it's not irrelevant because, to be perfectly honest, if Boris Johnson told me tomorrow was Tuesday, I'd have to take a rain check and look at a calendar. He's not answering the questions. Doctors were not even, GPs didn't know about this until 8 o'clock yesterday evening when he made the announcement. Now, if you're going to go into overdrive, panic, let's mobilise everybody, all hands to the pump, the least you could do as a courtesy would have been to tell those people who you are now saying to, sorry, you've got to cancel all those operations, all those people who've already been waiting. I mean, I can think of at least 3 very close people who are waiting for urgent cancer surgery. So what difference does it make to them if they have a booster or not? What difference is it making to all the people who've waited patiently whilst they've been abiding by the rules, playing by the rules, when this is purely a deflection of the real story around Boris Johnson's mishandling and inability to run and lead a country there is no doubt it's a crisis, but he's been doing it laughing behind the scenes.
Michael?
I think something I'm sort of concerned about in terms of every time we hear about a variant now, and of course the early signs are that this is what's being described as a mild variant, is what are we going to do in the longer term if we keep seeing variants crop up across the world every 3 to 6 months? Could this happen regularly now? And if so, the government need to be, I think, honest about the likelihood of that, because what are we going to have a government that every few months take away freedoms and then give them back? That doesn't seem very sustainable to me. So what is the likelihood that we are now going to see a whole stream of variants creeping up across the world to different degrees? And is the government's approach in the longer term going to be consistent with what we've seen this time? I also question, by the way, why there is not more scrutiny, more debate, more focus, more energy around how this mayhem was actually unleashed. Was it from a Wuhan lab? Was it done deliberately or not? Why is there not greater demand to find out why this has happened, how this has happened, so that, 2 things, we can hold those responsible accountable, but also to stop this from happening again?
Lisa?
I'm looking forward to what they're going to do when we get to Q.
Well, what number are we on now? Oh, yeah, we're on O.
We're on O, so we're not far off Q. So what's the Q going to be like? Quadrupedia? I don't know, but I think we are going to be making our way through the alphabet. But I suppose the point that I want to make here about this is, yes, the government wants to get us, these million people a day boosted, etc., etc. And these are numbers. But out there in the country, there is lots of suspicion and lots of fatigue. There's lots of COVID suspicion and lots of COVID fatigue. Just doing a straw poll of people who I know, people, and more than people who I know, people who have been part of my research in the past, they are very fatigued by all of this. They have had enough. They want to know when they can get back to their lives. Again, there's a fatigue about politicians on both sides. Language is very important, and I think this sort of constant panic is not doing any good for the rest of the country. Most people are switching off.
Yeah, and I mean, I do have to make clear, obviously, the government's not here to defend itself, but the government would certainly say, you know, it's our job to try and protect public safety. And if there's any whiff at all that this might be serious, it would be remiss of them not to be putting these kind of measures in place. So, I mean, I do have to be fair to the government on that. For me, I mean, because like anyone, I'm trying to make health decisions about vaccinations, boosters, doubles, triples, where do you stand? I'm trying to navigate and unpick my own way through this, as we all are.
Well, and I think that's the problem, Michelle. And I think, as Lisa says, you know, we're all in that position that we did do what we were told. We've done what we've done. And I'm absolutely, you know, pro-vaccine, pro-face mask and all of that stuff and all the sensible measures. But you can't keep doing, you know, the grand old Duke of York march them up to the top of the hill and down again and back again. You know, pubs, the hospitality industry, they've lost thousands, hundreds of thousands overnight because people have just cancelled parties. The rules are unclear. The government is not talking to doctors. Doctors are having to deal with patients. We're all having to pick our way through what we should be doing about Christmas parties, never mind about other health issues. And unfortunately, the government has lost, you know, the government has lost the trust of the people. And although people are fatigued, they probably would have been more compliant and more willing had they not seen the nonsense of the last few weeks, where we've seen a Prime Minister trying to get a friend off the hook, you know, whose staff have been seen laughing and joking about the party that did or didn't happen. You know, it's very difficult to make anybody take it seriously.
I think that the whole of Parliament have got something to blame in that, though. I think the way that the opposition, I say that loosely, but the way that the opposition has sort of been pulling on to, you know, now there's a Zoom party, should we be looking at the Zoom party? People have had enough of it. They've got real issues in their lives. They've got real problems, you know, picking their way through this. And I don't think there's any politician that's coming off looking good out of any of this.
Well, yeah, speaking about other politicians, you know, you set that one up nicely there, because Keir Starmer, he's apparently doing an announcement, I think it's about 7-ish tonight as well. What's your thoughts, Michael? What should he be saying? What are you hoping to hear from him?
Well, there hasn't been really, in my eyes, much opposition from the official opposition. They seem to want to lock down harder, earlier, do more damage to the economy. But there is no doubt, at the same time, that when you look at the polls, for the first time, Labour have taken a quite substantial lead over the Conservative Party. And trust is fading in what some of the government are saying. And that's why I think they need to be honest in a more long-term way about what this is likely to look like if every time there is a new variant, are we seriously saying that we're going to have to take away freedoms, give them back a couple of months later? Because if that is the case, this could be going on for years, surely.
Yeah, and one of the things, we had a poll running, by the way, on GBNews' Twitter, where we were asking you, what do you think to the whole kind of reprioritisation of the COVID boosters over the other health situations that we all have? It's still running, but I think it was around 6.5% of you said yes. You think that the boosters should be prioritised, and 93.5% said no. And I mean, you know, when we talk about things being delayed and you'll say, oh, it's non-urgent. Preparing yourself for an operation, for surgery, it can be quite a big deal. These will be people that are living in pain. These will be operations that people psychologically might have had to build themselves up to. And when these things are getting cancelled time after time after time after time again, the impact that has on people will be immense. And I've got some stats here from the National Audit Office. They're saying that there's between 240,000 and 740,000 missing referrals since the beginning of the pandemic. This is around things like cancer treatment, etc. What they're saying there, the result has been an estimated 35,000 to 60,000 fewer people starting treatment for cancer than would have been expected. The British Heart Foundation has come out and said it's detected an increase in deaths from heart disease. You know, these are kind of things that people, Joe, ordinarily, if you had a problem, you'd go to your doctor, he or she would listen to you and see if you can get referred. Well, now, trying to even get into your doctors...
Exactly. I mean, that's, you know, that you put your finger on it completely. You can't get an appointment. And it doesn't seem that long ago, unless I've imagined it, that Sajid Javid the health secretary was telling doctors that they had to see patients. Now he's telling them, no, you can't see patients. You've got to concentrate on vaccines. You know, it's this mixed messaging. We're told to go and you know, get some advice, get some help if we're worried about something that may or may not turn out to be cancer or indeed something else. But, you know, think about older people, people with dementia, people with Alzheimer's, people in care homes, people in social care situations who've got to organise a lot more in order to have medical treatment that they're now not going to get. And we've run out of lateral flow tests, apparently, in England. So how's that going to impact on people who are having to test, like frontline care workers, domiciliary care workers and people like that, going to visit the people who need to have help and care in their own homes and nursing homes?
Yeah, I mentioned the running out of lateral flow in my intro, and I can't find it now. I'm just scrolling through because I get so many emails coming in as I'm live on air, but I saw it fly in just as we started the show. Someone, and forgive me, I don't know who you are because I've lost the email now, but you messaged in saying it's not true that there was a lack or a shortage of lateral flow tests because you'd managed to get some today. So I think people are having different experiences, aren't they? But for me, Michael, I mean, my thing here is that it's this whole blanket approach. You know, we're just going to boost everyone down to the age of 18. We're going to do it rapidly. Why are we talking about the number of vaccines as opposed to the antibody levels? What I would like to hear is, right, everybody, you know, there's this strain and an ideal antibody level is X. So rather than just a conveyor belt of repeated vaccines, because vaccines do come with some side effects, however rare is to me irrelevant, they do. So I would like to know, right, what level of antibodies does one need to have? There'll be different levels, I would assume. I'm not a medical expert, so these are just questions that I have, by the way. You know, what levels does one need, and why aren't we being offered en masse antibody tests to understand the levels that we have? Because I have these and I pay for them privately because I want to know what are my antibody levels. So I have the answer to that question, and that will inform my decision as to what I do with injections going forward, not a blanket random statement from Boris Johnson. So why aren't people being offered these tests? You know, go and get your antibody levels tested. This is the level we would like to see it at. And if it's not at this level, then come and get a jab, a double jab, a triple jab, a booster, whatever level that you're on. Why is it just this blanket approach of boosters and all the rest of it? I don't know what I'm asking you as though you're a medical professional. And I do appreciate you're not a medical professional.
I'm certainly not that. No, look, I mean, I think, you know, the government had great success with the vaccine rollout strategy.
The scientists had great success with the vaccine.
Well, and there was the political aspect. We were free from the constraints of the EU and all that sort of stuff as well. I think that played a very big part. But look, I think the government clearly want to push a message that is very clear and is just with that single push on the booster, hoping that people... Because I think when we look at actually the last few weeks and months, they've actually been saying that when you look at the uptake on the boosters, actually it hasn't been going full throttle. And clearly Boris Johnson saw his duty yesterday just to push that single message for clarity. But of course, you know, there's going to be people out there, and I know a few, who haven't yet been vaccinated, who are actually saying, well, why would I go and get one vaccine now when some people who've had two are effectively being told they need to now get a third? So, it's, you know, you've got to remember as well, in society, in this country, across the world, people are at different stages of this, psychologically, medically, and that needs to be taken into account as well.
I think Boris Johnson as well, he's made a lot of political capital out of the jabs, hasn't he? In fact, it's the only political capital that he's made. It's the only sort of positive political capital he's made over the last year, is that, you know, this country has rolled the jab out and, you know, we've had access to some freedoms that people in Europe has not, and that's actually true, you know. And I think this is what he's doing again. You know, I think his sort of serious message last night, you know, sitting there for 10 minutes telling us we've almost have this booster. I think that was, again, it was sort of a political play, isn't it? It's what did somebody say? It's throwing the dead cat on the table, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's all.
Is that a journalist term?
Well, I don't know who came up with it first of all, but yes, if you want to distract people, throw a dead cat on the table.
Yeah.
Because they'll all start thinking about the dead cat. No, and of course Boris Johnson's the past master at this. He's a bit like, you know, the worst coach driver that we have all got stuck with. And we've gone, you know, almost off the precipice. We've had flat tyres, we've gone up cul-de-sacs, we've gone on the wrong ways, we had near misses. And now he's saying, come on, we're going up this mountain path. If everybody pushes all together, We'll get there. And actually, it's time we just said, you know what, I'm getting off this, I'm getting a taxi.
Well, there you go, a taxi for one. I'd get in that taxi, I can tell you. Anyway, Clive has emailed in saying this is all well and good, but Michelle, what would you do? I think you mean if I was the Prime Minister. I've got to say, Clive, luckily for everyone, I'm not the Prime Minister, I've got to say. But if I was, I would be trying to make sure that I'm transparent in my communications. I wouldn't be seeking to create senses of emergency where they might not perhaps be valid. I don't know if they're valid or not, but I would like to be giving context with things. I would like people to be able to make informed health decisions that are right for them, rather than almost terrifying everyone into making health decisions that are not personalised but a more blanket approach. That's what I would do, and as I say, it's probably a good job that I'm not, therefore, your Prime Minister. Anyway, going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the French. What's going on? I've got to say, it's the same old, same old. The fishing wars, it rumbles on. It's still not sorted, that argument over the licences. And now the French fishermen are offering, threatening, whatever you want to look at it, more disruption unless they get their licences. Should we just give in? We'll have that and more after the break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. A bit of a three-way split with the weather tomorrow. Most places going to be dry and bright, but there will be some wet and windy weather in the northwest, and the south at times likely to be a bit dull and dank. This wiggling, waving weather front's been bringing quite a wet day across parts of northwest England and Wales. It is slowly slipping southwards, so outbreaks of rain trickling into the Midlands and South Wales overnight and lasting most of the night here. Clearer skies for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and eastern Scotland, but then things turn wet and windy once more in the far northwest. Well, we have the clearing skies. Temperatures, certainly rural areas, could drop down close to freezing, but we're a long way from that in the south. A very mild night here, but it will be quite a dank, drizzly, misty morning across much of the south, the Midlands and parts of South Wales. Rain on and off here. That should tend to fizzle out, so most places becoming dry. But a brighter day for northwest England compared to today, and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland too. But there will be drizzly rain across western Scotland and very wet and windy across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. Quite mild here, and again pretty mild across the south. During the evening, we'll start to see that rain pepping up and pushing south across the Highlands, down towards the central belt, and some rain heading into Northern Ireland. So again, further south, most places dry, but it could again turn quite misty and murky, with maybe the odd light shower across the south on Wednesday. Certainly rain at times for northwest England, southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a brighter day in the far north, the winds easing down, and we should see some sunny spells too for parts of the North Midlands and eastern England on Wednesday. Again, pretty mild, double digits for the majority. Now, it's going to stay largely dry beyond Wednesday, Thursday and into the weekend. Not much rain around at all, but often it will be fairly cloudy with light winds and increasing chance of seeing some thick fog patches too.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage. I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. Lots of you getting in contact about that last discussion there. Derek from Cleethorpes. I love Cleethorpes. If you've never been to Cleethorpes, I highly recommend it, but that is me digressing because the point that Derek wants to make is about the point that someone has died with Omicron and not of it. I have to say, Derek, that for me personally, I think that that is one of the key points that we need to understand. Got to be honest though, because I said this on my Twitter today, lots of people completely disagree with me and with that point and think that it's absolutely irrelevant. And what I say is each to their own. If you are happy having boosters and multiple vaccinations without understanding some of these details, that is indeed your choice. If you are someone that would prefer to know the details, that is also your choice. Anyway, let's move on to a different topic, the French. It's been a couple of days, I think, since I spoke about the French, but the fishing row, you might remember all of this in the kind of post-Brexit situation. Well, some of the fishermen over in France, vowed last night to continue disrupting cross-channel trade in the run-up to Christmas. I mean, this is all about these licences, and still we haven't been able to agree how many licences to grant the French. And you know, what the French are saying is they're going to disrupt this kind of channel crossings, and therefore we're going to have struggles with supplies on the shelves in the run-up to Christmas. It's been a while, isn't it, since we've talked about empty shelves in the run-up to Christmas. Anyway, Michael, what do we do here? This is rumbling on and on and on and on. We don't seem to be getting any closer to resolving it. What's next?
Well, I mean, it's been described as sort of a fisheries war. It's not really a war. It's a one-sided onslaught from the French, from a Emmanuel Macron government who seem to be increasingly hostile towards Brexit UK. Perhaps that's because Macron, all the main challenges to him in France for the French presidency are standing as Eurosceptics now, so that's obviously rattled his government a bit. But I think, you know, people need to bear in mind, the UK already showed that we'd granted 96% of French licences requested, which I already think is way far too generous. But the French came back with more threats of blockades, and of course we've seen the French government talk about cutting energy supplies and things like of this nature as well. And then the British government, for some reason, have decided to bend over backwards over the weekend, and after that 96% of licences granted to the French, they've granted them even more. And what do we get in response? We now get even more threats and a French blockade potentially in the run-up to Christmas. I think the government are being far too soft on this. Instead of handing the French more licences, I think they need to tell them to pack it in now, or we're going to start revoking fishing licences if they don't wind it in a bit.
But surely, though, isn't it just even simpler than that? You've got a criteria to meet, one of which, by the way, is things like, have you been able to prove, or are you able to prove that you've fished in these waters pre the Brexit stuff? if people meet that criteria, whether it's 96% or 100% or 10%, surely the question should just be, do you meet this criteria, yes or no? And if you do, and that's the criteria that both sides of you have agreed to, then the percentage is irrelevant.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. But as I said, the British government have already been incredibly generous. 96%, I repeat the point. Virtually every application from the French, and I think it was 98%, from all EU vessels have been granted. And yet we get this consistent diet of threats, of the ramping up of what's going to happen in the run-up to Christmas. And I repeat the point, I think the time has come now for the government, rather than continue to dish out licences, tell them to dial down the rhetoric, dial down the threats. We're not going to put up with it anymore. And if you don't stop, in fact, you can have licences taken away. Because if they're whinging and complaining so much about having 96% plus granted, let's see how they like 0% access.
Yeah, and Joe, I mean, we've got to be kind of mindful here as well. You've got an election coming up in France.
Yeah.
People like Macron, and not just Macron, obviously the other contenders, you've got to be seen to be talking tough to the UK. You've also got a scenario where it wasn't good for the EU that a prominent country like the UK left. And they need to try and do everything possible to dissuade other countries from leaving the European Union, making life as difficult as possible, etc. What's your thoughts?
Well, I don't think Michael's got a career in the diplomatic service. Let's put it like that. That's my first thought. But I think, you know, French fishermen being angry, plus ça change, is what I would say. I mean, this has been going on.
What does that mean for my viewers that don't speak French?
It means it goes on.
It's been going on since the Norman conquest, hasn't it?
You know, it is difficult. We have got a terrible relationship with France, partly to do with leaving Europe, and partly because, as has already been said, the upcoming French presidential elections. But, you know, you talk about dialing down the rhetoric. The boot is on the other foot when you've got Priti Patel talking and shouting and screaming at French border force and French people, French authorities about the boats that are leaving with migrants on and then sadly, you know, sinking in the Channel. There's an awful lot of bad feeling between France and Britain. And I think it's important to say that whilst, you know, this is a relatively minor dispute because fishing represents a very, very small amount of business and industry in this country. It is incredibly emotive. It's incredibly totemic. We are, you know, an island nation. Fishing is really important. An awful lot of fishing communities voted for Brexit. For some reason, they didn't think and didn't realise that they were going to be sold down the river, you know, by a government that couldn't care less about the deals that it's done. You know, the sort of shortages on the shelves, well, you know, I sort of think, so what?
Yeah.
It'll fizzle out. People aren't exactly going backwards and forwards across the Channel like they used to. We chose to leave, wrongly in my view. You know, the people who voted for Brexit, and as I say, many of them were fishing communities, they need to ask themselves why.
Lisa?
I mean, I agree with Joe on a lot of those points, actually, that, you know, it's always good for the politicians on either side of the Channel, you know, the French-Anglo sort of war that we go into every few years. It's great for chest beating. And I think Macron's doing it on this side, on that side, and I think Johnson and definitely Priti Patel is doing. It's sort of, you know, breastbeating that sort of national sort of pride thing. And I'll be honest, I don't like it. I really don't like it. And I really don't like using, you know, French fishermen or English fishermen to sort of create this sort of nationalistic war. I'll be honest, I find it very uncomfortable when they do it on both sides. I think that the French fishermen and I think the British fishermen have probably got far more in common with each other than they have with Emmanuel Macron or Boris Johnson.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I have to say, the threats have all come from one direction, as I say, from an increasingly hostile Emmanuel Macron government. And let's have it absolutely right. This government has given the French, wrongly in my view, tens of millions of pounds to try and stop the illegal migration crisis. And what have the French authorities done? There have been countless reports now of the French authorities standing on the beaches and watching it go on. And that, you know, the latest bunch of money we gave them, £54 million. That is absolutely disgraceful. And I have to say, I actually think the British government in this have been very restrained. If you look at some of the comments being made by French ministers about the UK, about Brexit, about even Boris Johnson. I can't recall personal digs on that level from anyone in the British government. I actually think they need to get a lot tougher and hit back at some of this, because frankly at the moment it's one-sided, it's criticism from the French, we give them more licences and then they threaten us with blockades and even more trouble.
We haven't got a very good reputation, Michael. I mean, you know, we've lied, we've got a Prime Minister who's lied, we've got a EU negotiator.
Lied about what?
Oh, about so many things. You know, I can give you a list as long as you're on. But I
well,
mean,
just give me a couple of examples. Don't give me a long list.
He wants to change the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is a key plank of the European exit agreement. One of the things about immigration is that since we left Europe, we're no longer part of the scheme that allows those people to be returned back to mainland European.
Is that the Dublin 3 one or whatever it's called?
Yes, exactly.
I mean, yeah, but they weren't very effective in doing that though. When we wasn't,
but we haven't even got that opportunity. And I just think, you know, we are just as bad. And it's, you know, it's willy waving to be crude. Or breastbeating or whatever you want to say. It is just this ghastly sabre rattling that has gone on forever between France and England, and it doesn't do anybody any
Since
good.
the arrow in the eye.
Exactly.
Macron's government are obsessed.
Well, there you go. It might not be Macron's government for much longer. We shall see. Anyway, let's just park the fishing for now. Lots of you getting in touch. Not much sympathy with the French, I have to say. I've got to be fair to the French, though. If someone was sitting on this panel now, they would probably argue, to Michael's point when he says we've given them millions and they do nothing about illegal immigration, they would probably say that they do do stuff. We'd have a difference of opinion there, perhaps. Jeff says, well, why don't we just make it clear that if they block our ports or take further action, we're just going to pull all of the licences. Lots of that sentiment coming through, got to be honest with you there. Lots of you still as well getting in contact about COVID. And Jessie's been in contact, raising an important point. She says, why aren't we having a national conversation about things like China and Russian aggression? She says, I'm tired. Or you might be, I don't know if I'm saying she, I don't know. You're saying you're tired about hearing about COVID. Well, I've got to say, I couldn't agree with you more on terms of, you know, things that are going on in places like Ukraine, Russia. There's a lot going on and we are very distracted. I mean, we as an entity, as a collective, get very distracted about things like pub quizzes and things like that. You'll be pleased to know then, Jessie, that tomorrow we'll be looking at the whole kind of Ukraine situation, so make sure you tune in for that. Anyway, going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be looking at children being chaperoned to and from school in the West Midlands by youth workers to try and deter stabbings and gang violence. This is a new scheme. Is it a good idea? And will it work? We'll be looking at that and more after the break.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight. Leaving the egregious attack on our liberties aside, do Plan B measures even make any scientific sense? The positive professor, Carol Sikora, gives us his expert opinion on that. And how do we cope with our hypocritical government threatening basic freedoms at Christmas again? GB News star and the public's voice of reason throughout this pandemic, Neil Oliver, tackles that in The Outsider. Plus, I'll break down the day's top stories with Monday's superstar panel, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the social commentator Esther Kraku. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m, Monday to Thursday on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs and Co. Now, youth workers in the West Midlands will monitor children in a trial scheme which has successfully reduced the number of stabbings and muggings in America. Children will receive chaperones on their way to and from school, and it's part of a £1 million government scheme called Step Together. The first such scheme was recently launched in Birmingham a few weeks ago, and in the new year, chaperones will also monitor pupils at another 17 locations identified by police around the West Midlands. The launch followed concerns that violence, including school-aged teenagers, including the murder of a 15-year-old who was stabbed and shot dead by a gang of teenagers in January. I've got to say, Lisa, you know, if anything, quite frankly, that tries to keep kids safe is a tick in my book. But is this more around kind of the symptom as opposed to the cause?
Do you know, when I see headlines like this, I always just see that these are headlines. If we're going to have youth workers, and let's think about the amount of youth worker jobs that has gone over the last 10 years, the amount of youth clubs that have gone and youth services which have gone, and we're going to now have youth workers to chaperone children to school. Why haven't we got the youth clubs open and things for kids to do before, after, or, you know, at lunchtime? Why do we need them to be chaperoned? This is, you know, I always hate this sort of connection with the USA. The UK is not the USA. We have completely different social issues. I know it's dead easy for us to kind of go, oh, it's the same, but it's not the same. We don't have the levels of gang violence that they see in the US. I'm not saying that we don't have drug wars and turf wars in some communities. That does happen. But what we've basically got is chronically underfunded communities where there is nothing for young people and kids to do anything in there. Chaperoning children to and from school, so what? They're still going to be out in their communities after school. You know, most of the criminologists will tell you the danger point for kids is usually after school, probably about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and it's around the places that they hang out. What we're going to do, you know, we used to have youth clubs for kids to go in then. So, you know, if we can afford to have chaperones, we can afford to open the youth clubs.
But what would you say, just before I move on briefly, Lisa, what would you say to someone that would say, well, hang on a second, just because you haven't got a youth club, that doesn't give you a passage then, a pass to therefore grab a knife and go randomly around stabbing someone just because they're living in a different postcode to you?
No, I mean, and the thing is, I don't think anybody, no one is stabbing anybody because there isn't a youth club to go to. But what I am saying is, if we're going to have youth services, what we should have we should have youth services that are positive, that help children, you know, with a hopeful future, not youth services that are there to protect children from the badness or actually from themselves. I don't think it's a good message to be sending out, actually. It creates a lot of fear in a community, that.
What, the chaperones?
Yeah, I think so. I really don't like the idea of them.
Sure.
I think it's worth a try. And I hear what Lisa says about, you know, we're not in the States, but this has been very successful in Chicago. It's a trial. I think the problem with youth violence is that if you get into a situation where kids are frightened to go to and from school, then what happens is that they stop going to school. They play truant, and then they are easy prey for gangs. And then the slow, you know, the rapid spiral begins. And I think, you know, I don't know enough about this particular scheme and how it's funded, or whether they're taking youth workers away from other projects. But I do think, you know, if you can do something that acts as a bit of a deterrent that stops gangs or, you know, bad people hanging around, then it's got to be better than the alternative of having sort of metal scanners and things and kids, you know, we've had some bonkers idea of having to have armed guards in schools, which would be going down the American route. So it's worth a try.
I mean, I think it's diabolical. The actual headline on this story was chaperones to guard pupils. If you have to guard children to go to school in your country, your neighbourhood, then you're not living in a very safe environment, are you? I think one of the big things on this that we don't talk about enough is actually being far tougher when it comes to law and order. I am sick and tired when it comes to knife crime of seeing the word suspended sentence. People could go and Google this. Go and Google knife attack, suspended sentence. People caught with knives. People attacking people with knives. Avoiding jail time and time again. We should have mandatory jail sentences for people that want to go around carrying knives with the intent to hurt, possibly kill people. And surely that, you know, if we put people behind bars for years for carrying knives, that would send a strong message that actually we're not going to put up with this anymore, because violent crime, and when you look at the ages of those involved, is on the rise and is absolutely disgusting.
Well, I think you took the words right out of the mouth of Peter, who has been in touch, because Peter was saying pretty much the same thing. Dewbs, why isn't there a compulsory minimum 1-year sentence in prison or a youth detention centre for being in possession of a knife in a public place? His sentiment there is actually you need to be tougher on people carrying these knives. And I have to say, chaperones wouldn't necessarily just be to and from school. It'd be around places where lots of pupils gather. So I don't know, maybe outside takeaways or shops or wherever it is. Myself and our very own Liam Halligan, actually, we have a school nearby here, a boys' school nearby here, and myself and Liam Halligan were loitering outside of a shop the other day, and a gang of school children started a fight right in front of us. It was very strange. It was a very strange scenario. We got involved. I take a bit of credit, but to be fair, it was mainly Liam, whilst I was involved, but not as much as him. And I have to say, it was actually quite scary after it. I did think to myself, oh, we were very lucky then that nobody had a knife. Yeah, I have to say.
You know, I don't...
Keep this brief because I want to talk about something else.
Well, all I'm saying is I don't like all this sort of media rhetoric around we should always be frightened of teenagers. I think it's sort of... I think fear always reproduces fear.
Well, I've got to say, we got involved, and it was afterwards. I thought to myself, actually, I was a little bit scared afterwards.
I know. I remember perhaps people thought that about me when I was 15. I was scary. Actually, they think that now. But
well, anyway, I've only got a couple of moments left, and of course, we all know that the real big man himself, Santa Claus, he's busy at the moment, isn't he, in the North Pole, sorting out all of the gifts for those of us that have been good. If there are kids watching, of course, you do have to be good. It's a very crucial time period if you do want your gifts. He's watching and he knows what you're up to. But he has helpers, doesn't he? He has helpers there around that we can take our kids to, that they can give the letters to and requests to and all the rest of it. But there's been a bit of a problem with these friends of Santas, because there's lots of places now that need more friends. We need more friends for Santa. They're willing to pay quite a bit of money, £800 a day in some places, where you can get dressed up and take these requests and get those requests back to the real big man himself. But I wonder, why do you think there is such a shortage? Because £800 a day to be a friend of Santa, if I was an old bloke, I'd be right in there doing it. But Michael, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, this Mirror story actually has the words Santa shortage caused by Brexit as one of the things. So
right.
Merry Brexmas, because, of course, we've seen record job vacancies, companies this Christmas offering £1,000, £2,000, £3,000 bonuses. It's a workers' market. So Merry Brexmas indeed for British workers.
Well, you're a little bit young, I think. Anyway, to be a helper, you might have to wait a few years.
You've been elf.
I'm ageing very quickly, maybe in a couple of years.
And there are all sorts of other things now what's supposed to be watching, like elves on shelves and...
Oh, I love those things.
We didn't have them. I used to just, with my son who's now 33, we used to just go Santa's watching and phone him up. That was enough.
Right. Oh, was it?
Old school.
My kid's only 1, but he's definitely going to be getting taught about the elves. He's going to have to behave.
Yeah, they ought to be around all the time.
And do you know what else I'm going to do? Speaking of, we digress a little bit, but I'll tell him a story. What I'm going to do when my kid's old enough is if he's naughty, I'm going to show him on Christmas Day all the gifts that he could have got.
Oh, you're so horrible.
And then
horrible.
And then I'm going to take them away, and I'm not going to give him them.
You say that now, Michelle.
I guarantee you, anyone that knows me will know that I will do this. I don't like naughty children, I've got to say, and I will not, hopefully, allow my child. Although I've got to say, I don't like naughty children. I'm sitting here with a big black eye because my 1-year-old's whacked me. So, there you go.
He didn't mean to.
His little face, when he's 3, his little face, and you're going to sit there on Christmas Day. You are the Grinch.
Well, Santa knows what's what.
Well, you're
Santa
not going to be a
knows.
Santa, are you? You're not Mummy Santa Claus.
Santa knows what's what, and any kids that are watching this, I tell you, you better watch yourself because he doesn't mess around as our Santa, and if you are naughty, he most certainly will know about it. So my advice from Dewbs & Co, I tell you, behave yourselves if you want your Christmas presents. Anyway, that is all we've got time for. It flies by, doesn't it, when you're having fun? Lisa, Michael, Joe, thank you very much. You've got people talking, I've got to say, on the emails and the social media about that. Anyway, that is all we've got time for. I'll say goodbye for now, and I'll be back tomorrow, same time, 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock. You have yourselves a very good evening in the meantime, and I'll see you tomorrow.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. A bit of a three-way split with the weather tomorrow. Most places going to be dry and bright, but there will be some wet and windy weather in the northwest, and the south at times likely to be a bit dull and dank. This wiggling, waving weather front's been bringing quite a wet day across parts of northwest England and Wales. It is slowly slipping southwards, so outbreaks of rain trickling into the Midlands and South Wales overnight and lasting most of the night here. Clearer skies for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and eastern Scotland, but then things turn wet and windy once more in the far northwest. Where we have the clearing skies, temperatures certainly in rural areas could drop down close to freezing, but we're a long way from that in the south. A very mild night here, but it will be quite a dank, drizzly, misty morning across much of the south, the Midlands and parts of South Wales. Rain on and off here. That should tend to fizzle out, so most places becoming dry. But a brighter day for northwest England compared to today, and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland too. But there will be drizzly rain across western Scotland and very wet and windy across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. Quite mild here, and again pretty mild across the south. During the evening, we'll start to see that rain pepping up and pushing south across the Highlands, down towards the central belt, and some rain heading into Northern Ireland. So again, further south, most places dry, but it could again turn quite misty and murky, with maybe the odd light shower across the south on Wednesday. Certainly rain at times for northwest England, southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a brighter day in the far north, the winds easing down, and we should see some sunny spells too for parts of the North Midlands and eastern England on Wednesday. Again, pretty mild, double digits for the majority. Now, it's going to stay largely dry beyond Wednesday, Thursday and into the weekend. Not much rain around at all, but often it will be fairly cloudy with light winds and increasing chance of seeing some thick fog patches too.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation.